Hello again. Just found another story, so quite quickly after the last one. This is going to be quite fun, I think, a little bit more light-hearted, but at the same time, I think it might have some serious undertones. Um, Once again, I've not read the story yet. I've only read the first couple of lines just to see if it caught my interest at all, or if it piqued my want to discuss it with you. Um, but it is going to be, I think, a great example of why the NHS is not wholly, but partly skint. Before I get into reading it, I don't think there's any silver bullet with the NHS. I think it's a whole plethora of reasons that have resulted in it becoming the essentially bankrupted system that it is today. But this it definitely highlights part of the problem within the system. So let's crack on. Labour's Jess Phillips says she had £6,000 breast reduction surgery to stop male MPs leering at her. Labour MP Jess Phillips said the operation was not done for cosmetic reasons. She called the surgery the greatest thing that ever happened to me. Labour MP Jess Phillips accused male MPs of harbouring an obsession with the size of her chest after revealing she had breast reduction surgery. Well, to be fair, I mean, that is normal male behaviour. And I think the problem that we've got with a lot of feminists at the moment is that they are in complete and utter denial about human nature. And unfortunately, if you don't like that kind of behaviour, I'm not trying to make excuses for it, but it's just something you've got to. It's like it's like complaining about a cat purring, or dogs barking. It's just it's one of them things. Unfortunately, it's human nature. And again, I've not read the article yet, so maybe it might address this later. But maybe if you've got that much of a problem with men staring at your breasts, maybe try dressing a bit more modestly. Maybe there's things you can do yourself in your own life that you have control over, rather than being a control freak and trying to demand that everybody else changes to suit you. I mean, 6 grand on this when putting a decent blouse on could have solved this. But no. The NHS after well, it might not be the NHS actually. She could have gone private. I don't know. I take that back. But this there are problems with this in the NHS though. Money like this getting spent on breast reductions and things like that. Just for and sometimes cosmetic. Breast enlargements as well. But anyway, let's crack on with it. Miss Phillips said the operation, which she underwent 2 years ago, was not done for cosmetic reasons, but helped relieve a lifetime of but helped relieve a lifetime of neck and back pain. I do get that. My ex-wife had rather large chesticles, and she got some back and neck problems from that. However, she also blamed the male gaze, adding, "All they are talking about is your cleavage, especially in this place." Well, cover yourself up. Like you're in Parliament. You've got absolutely no reason to have your cleavage out on display in Parliament. Like, to be honest with you, I mean, could you imagine if male MPs were walking through with a nutsack hanging out or half of it on display? There's the flies are half open so you can see inside. It's not hanging out, but you can see the sack at the very least. That'd be unacceptable, wouldn't it? Why is it deemed acceptable for a member of Parliament to be walking around showing the cleavage? It's disgusting. And it's not me trying to be all modest and moral. It's a place of running the country. It's one thing if you're running like a pub, or you're a nail salon bar, or any other bit, car showroom, whatever. That's it's a casual, quite a semi professional environment. But if I go to see my doctor and my doctor turns out to be a female that day, I don't want to see half of her tits hanging out. Sorry for the language, but it's you're there for business. It's not about you. Button your top up. I couldn't wear anything that didn't make me look like a tent or trying to look sexy. If you wear anything even slightly tight and you have big boobs, you don't. What are you doing going into a professional place trying to look sexy? Why do you need to look sexy when you're working in Parliament? It's not about you. It's about running the country. This is the insanity of feminism. It's all about me, 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 me. What can I do? What can I do? Why can't I do this? Why can't I do that? Well, I don't care. It's not about you. Some things don't revolve around you, including you being an MP. It's not about you. It's about you serving your constituents and doing what they need. It's not about you having half your chest hanging out. And for that fact, why are you wearing makeup in Parliament as well? Why do you need to wear makeup? It's not about you. She called the surgery the greatest thing that ever happened to me, apart from her husband and children, and dismissed criticism that her decision was anti-feminist. Well, I don't get that. She said, people can think whatever they like, but I paid for it with money that I had. Well, fair enough. Fair enough. I take back the NHS thing. She paid for it with her own money. So that's her business. But at the end of the day, I'm standing by the whole, what are you doing walking out with your cleavage hanging out in Parliament? That's just unacceptable. I think, who was it? Andrea Rayner. She tried dragging Boris Johnson into a bit of a scandal with that, trying to do the old basic instincts in Parliament at one point. And again, it's naughty. Shouldn't be doing that in there. That should be automatic dismissal. But they won't do it because they're scared of the furore of everybody screaming sexual discrimination and all that rubbish. In London, it's 10 grand, so it's cheaper in Birmingham. I get the feminist argument. Why do I feel this way? It's undoubtedly because of the male gaze. But the outcome is, I feel better. I can exercise more. I'm healthier. It's my body. It's my choice. Yeah, I totally agree with that. It is her body. It is her choice. As long as she's paying with it, fair enough. The healthier part, I think part of that you could say she's exercising and that. She's just not stretching off properly. With proper stretching off and posture and things like that, you can deal with stuff like that. But it's whether you're motivated enough to do it. Exercising properly on your back, it's all you've just got to strengthen your back up to counteract the weight on the front. The Birmingham Yardley MP, who last month quit Sir Keir Starmer's shadow cabinet over his refusal to call for a ceasefire in Gaza, also told the Times magazine it felt exhausting that misogyny, sexual harassment, and even rape were still part of parliamentary life. Well, maybe men and women can't work together. I know that might sound quite radical to some people, but maybe men and women actually can't work together. Maybe men and women being able to work together is a fantasy, and it's just not possible. Because at the end of the day, it is an experiment what's being conducted at the moment, a social experiment. Now, I'm not saying that is factually correct, by the way. Well, this is the thing that these people never consider. That maybe the reality is butting up against ideology in regards to these human beings. At the end of the day, we're not automatons. We're not robots. We are still living, breathing, thinking animals. So, and this is the problem with socialists. They've got their ideology, which demands that everybody works in a perfect, unified manner, but people aren't perfect. Which I think is the spanner in the works for these people. But as for the misogyny and sexual harassment, is it misogyny and sexual harassment? Or is it people being overly sensitive? I can't comment on that. I don't know what she's referring to. But I do find that a lot of things that people complain about these days, a big thing in the hashtag Me Too, where there were a lot of women complaining about being sexually assaulted, but it may be that a male colleague walked over to them. They'd ask to say for help on, say, something on a computer. So the male colleague would walk over, stand next to him, and just place the hand on the shoulder whilst looking at the screen and talk, pointing at the screen with one hand, with the other hand on the shoulder. That's a normal thing for people to do, but that would be classed as sexual assault. And this is the problem now that we're facing in society with a lot of these issues, where this ideology's got so out of hand now that even a man walking up to a woman and simply asking her a question now can be deemed as being a form of sexual intimidation. But again, it's the logical conclusion of the ideology, because these concepts are so nebulous and so vapid. You can apply them to literally any situation. It's like with the hate crime legislation. Going off topic a bit, it doesn't even need to be a person. Like I could be stood in my garden, talking to my neighbour about the joy of gardening, and a third person could hear that and can decide for themselves that I'm being racist talking about that, because it is merely the perception by another person can be deemed enough, and read it yourself. I am paraphrasing that, but I believe that's within the accurate. Read it yourself. The UK hate crime legislation. It's not even based on any sort of facts. It's just a perception. the belief that you're being racist, either by the victim, well, and they're automatically called the victim, by the way. So anybody who complains is automatically a victim. But also just by so like you could have me speaking to somebody of any non-Indigenous British descent. I could be talking to them in the street about anything at all. Somebody can be walking past and can ring up the police on their behalf and say that I'm being racist. Like, it's that nebulous. It is insane. And it's the same with a lot of these laws around women being sexually assaulted and things like that. They're so nebulously written as to be. That I don't even know how the laws actually get ascended. Apart from the higher stratas of our society, are just so gripped by by this ideology that they're all like with the grooming gangs. They're all too cowardly to say no to it because they're all so concerned about being labelled an ist or a nigger to whatever, of some sort, some sort of phobe. It feels a little bit like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, she said. This is a person who's an MP, like one of the most privileged people in our society. She's complaining about nothing. It isn't a man's world. It's a world in which women are much more tired than they used to be. Really? You think you're more tired than you go back to Victorian England and you tell that to a woman who was like a fisherman's wife, or a woman whose husband was down the mine for up to 14 hours every day, and she was trying to deal with 6 to 8 kids and having to wash everything by hand, prepare all the food, go shopping that day because there was no refrigeration for the food, having to chop all the wood up, like literally beating the rug by hand to get the dust out because there's no vacuum cleaners. You go back in time and you go back to, say, the 1800s when people, the overwhelming majority of people lived on small holdings and they were having to till the land by hand, using hand tools to till the ground so they could sow the seeds. Do you think you're more tired than those women? Are you serious? This is the absolute madness of these overly pampered, overly privileged people with far too much time on their hands to think and pontificate about crap because they live such comfortable lives. The heads are so far up their own backside, they're getting high off their own farts. My God. People will refer to any argument you make, regardless of how economic it might be, as being emotional. Well, it's because half the time it is emotional. The Honourable Lady is led by her heart, and who would blame her? F off. I'm led by the data. No, Jess, you're really not, because up to now, and please prove me wrong, somebody. I would love to be proven wrong, but I don't believe you've said a single thing in defence of the grooming gang victims, have you? You're quick to speak up about Gaza and make a stink about that and make a big show and a dance of stepping down from the shadow cabinet for that. But when it comes to girls in this country who are overwhelmingly Anglo-Saxon, working-class white girls who are of a Christian background, you don't say nothing about them, do you? You're silent on those victims. But is that because your electorate are going to be the overwhelming perpetrators of those crimes? The majority of your electorate in Yardley. Is that what it comes down to? Is that why you're willing to speak out about Israel, but not speak out about girls in this country being raped on an industrial scale? And please correct me if I'm wrong. I would love to be wrong, and I would love to make a public retraction video about that, because the silence by so many prominent so-called feminists on the grooming gangs is unbelievable. They're quick to complain about having the cleavage looked at in Parliament, but they won't speak out about girls being raped on an industrial scale and being murdered, and one of them suspected of being chopped up and put into kebab meat in Blackpool. Look that up, by the way. That is a real story. Blackpool, the only a gang in Blackpool were involved in grooming a young girl, 14 years old. She disappeared, and the police believe that they put her into the kebab meat. I do still feel like women have a club together to get heard across parties as well. Yeah, well, unless you're from a white working class Anglo-Saxon Christian background, then you're just a problem to the ideology, aren't you? It feels like we just can't say anything. 20 of us have to say something. That's annoying. Yeah, well, thousands and thousands of girls were talking about being raped and nobody listened. In fact, them and their families were arrested by the police. And you had MP Naz Shah of your party send a tweet out saying the victims of Rotherham should shut up for the sake of hashtag diversity. Right, so please don't try and say that you're so hard done by when you will not speak up for women and girls who actually are victims of real patriarchal problems. Miss Phillips, 42, said her decision to quit as Keir Starmer's shadow minister for domestic violence. I mean, minister for domestic violence and safeguarding. And yet I've never ever heard her speak about girls being raped or by grooming gangs, by predominantly Pakistani, Bangladeshi, Muslim rape gangs, to be specific. Never once have I heard her talk about that. Please, I'd love to be wrong about that. I absolutely would. And added that she was not taking sides in the Gaza conflict and instead trying to get British Gazan families, including some of her constituents, out of the area. Yeah, well, there you go, her constituents. That's why she has the ideology. That's why she speaks about those things. She doesn't actually care about Britain. She cares about her job, in my opinion. She also told the magazine that Israel had a right to defend itself and that she had not joined any pro-Palestine rallies. Well, fair enough to that. At least she's being sensible in that regard. You know. And by the way, there are things, by the way, with Jess Phillips that I don't necessarily disagree with. You know, the way she talks about like people being underpaid and stuff like that. I'm not against her on everything for anybody who thinks that I'm just like chest poking, pun intended, because she's Labour and I dislike her in that regard. I've got nothing against her personally. You know, I've never met the woman. I just find this particular side of her, which she's very vocal about, to be quite obnoxious and disingenuous. Very, very disingenuous. It worries me that they're anti-Semitic, she said. The idea that Jewish people feel frightened to share their identity is chilling. And that's the end of the article. I think, anyway. I'll just have another quick look. Yeah, it appears that's the end of the article. Yeah, it is. That's the end of the article. Right. So, just a bit of a quicker one today. If you like that, I'll put the link below. Please just take a quick visit to the site. Obviously, it helps the newspaper with the get a bit of traction to their page and with their advertisers. And if you found this informative and interesting, please like, subscribe, and put a comment below. Thank you. I'll post another video later. Take care. Bye-bye.